Hey guys, so this week it's the lead up to Easter and we are so excited to be able to delve into the amazing Easter story next week. But today we're going to be focusing on serve with love. The idea that Jesus came not to be served but to serve, and unpacking a little bit what that looks like and means for our lives today.
There have been many times in my life when I have been really blessed or uplifted by someone who has served me through love. These have been times when, for example, my friends have just really gone out of their way to show their love for me, sacrificially for no glory of their own. One example of this is when I was living with my two friends last year. They would continually knock on my door each morning with a cup of tea. I know this sounds like a really small act, but this would super bless me, and I would be left thinking, why do they keep doing this? I don't deserve this. This blessed my heart and touched me more than probably either of these girls will ever know. But seeing those you love around you do something just to serve you, just to bless you, holds huge power.
Today, we're going to be looking at a story where Jesus demonstrates his great love for his disciples in an amazing way. He models, that means he sets an example for how he calls us and wants us to live, how we are to love one another. In Matthew 20, verses 20 to 28, a mother approaches Jesus and asks if her two sons can have the best seats in all of heaven. Jesus has to open their minds and help them to understand that he and his kingdom do not measure greatness in the same way that the world we live in measures greatness. He compares how, in the world around them, people who have high positions in life love to show off all of their power that they have over the people, and important leaders love to use all of their authority. Verse 26 to 28, Jesus says, "But it should not be that way amongst you. Whoever wants to be great amongst you has to serve the others just like a servant. In the same way, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. He came to serve and to give his life as a price, a ransom for the sins of many people."
When Jesus was on the cross, the gospel accounts tell us how people were hurling insults at him, saying things like, "Show your authority, demonstrate your power by coming down off the cross if you are who you say you are." He saved others, but he is not able to save himself. The world wanted Jesus to demonstrate his power on the cross by saving himself. Yet what they did not understand was that what hung before them on the cross was a far greater, far more loving and self-sacrificial King, Lord and friend than they could have ever comprehended or imagined. John 15 verse 13 says this, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down his life for his friends." Jesus could have shown off his power and revealed who he really was in those moments when people were humiliating and insulting him, those whom he had created and designed. Yet he chose not to be served but to serve, and to lay down his whole life so that we can have life in him forever, and not only that, so we can have a close and personal relationship with him every day.
Romans 8 verse 5 says this, "But God showed his great love for us in this way. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us." Our sin and our mess, the wrong that we do, think and say, was separating us from having a close relationship with God. But God stepped into that mess, lived a perfect life in that mess. He died and rose to life again, freeing us from the hold that the sin and mess in our lives can have over us. Instead, now we can be forgiven, free from sin, and know what it is to have his love, lordship and friendship in our life each and every day. Instead of choosing to use his power and authority to save himself from death on a cross, in humiliation and torment, Jesus chose instead to save us and set us free. So why don't you grab a Bible and let's jump into today's story, which is in John chapter 13, verses 3 to 17.
happens just as Jesus is about to be handed over to be crucified, to die on the cross. In verse 3, it says how Jesus knew that the Father had given him power over everything. Yet what does he choose to do with all of this knowledge? It says that he humbled himself, that he took off his cloak, knelt down and began to wash the disciples' feet.
In those days, people would have travelled around mainly on foot, in open-toed sandals on roads that were absolutely filthy and covered in muck. Their feet would have got so dirty, you can't even imagine, and it would have been the job of a servant to come and wash people's feet. But seeing as how in our story there were no servants around, not even the disciples had thought to offer to wash each other's feet. Instead, Jesus, the Son of God, God in human form, the creator of the universe and all life in it, moments before going to the cross to pay the ultimate sacrifice, decided to get down on his knees and serve his disciples in an amazing and radical way.
Jesus explains in verse 12, saying, "Do you understand what I have just done for you? If I, your Lord and teacher, washed your feet, you too should then wash each other's feet. I did this as an example for you, so that you should do as I have done. If you know these things, you will then be blessed if you do them." It pleases God's heart when we seek to serve one another in radical and amazing ways. Yet just like my example at the start, it doesn't need to be huge or dramatic. It's just a case of putting others above ourselves, of caring more for the other person than our own sense of power, achievement or glory.
So let's finish with this great truth from Philippians chapter 2 verses 5 to 8, and it sums up what we've been talking about today really well. And it says this: "In your lives, think and act like Christ Jesus." Christ himself was like God in every way, but he did not think that being equal with God was something to be used to his own advantage. He gave up his place with God and made himself into nothing. He was born to be a man and became like a servant. And when he was living as a man, he humbled himself, being totally obedient to God, even when that led to his own death on a cross.
And the amazing truth is this, that as we seek to serve others above ourselves, we ourselves are blessed. This doesn't necessarily mean that we get a reward for doing so. It means something much greater. It means that in our hearts we can feel and encounter God's love, joy and the closeness of his presence. It means that God is able to amaze us with his goodness and can bless us in a far greater way in return.
Guys, the questions this week are really simple. Can you think of a time when someone has served you and how it made you feel? Who can you seek to serve this week? Does God need to work on your heart and soften it towards those you're living with? Invite his presence into your heart to inspire you with ideas of how you serve each other joyfully this week.